Russia's economy is headed for collapse and it will run out of money in the next 18 months. The country is experiencing this economic disaster, and Putin has been hiding it from the West. With this, he's been manipulating currency rates, hiding key economic statistics, and nitpicking data. As the mainstream media buys into Putin's words, local officials are protesting at parliament meetings. This is the truth behind Russia's economy, and if you're interested to hear more about it, then stick with us till the end of this video. Hey, welcome to Stock Market Mate. Today, we will take a look into the truth behind Russia's economic disaster. Before we get into it, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to help us beat the YouTube algorithm. If you're done with that, then let's get right into it. Since the Soviets caved in, Russia is met with an economic upheaval of the scale provoked by Western sanctions after its invasion of Ukraine. Half its $640 billion foreign exchange reserves are frozen, several of its top banks have been cut off from the international payment system, and Urals crude, thanks to sanctions risks, is selling at about $20 a barrel discount to international prices. About 1,000 Western companies, accounting by one estimate for 40% of Russian gross domestic product, have curtailed operations. However, 6 months after Vladimir Putin's reckless actions triggered the toughest Western sanctions against Moscow, Russia's economy is holding up better than expected, though the war seems, at least for now, at a deadlock. And Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan claims Putin is ready for negotiation. Sanctions have not yet corroded Moscow's ability to fight on. Moscow's central bank's quick actions to impose capital controls and sharply raise interest rates have stabilized the said crisis. Higher global oil prices overall have offset the Russia discount, and rising sales to China, India, and Turkey help to counteract declining exports to the EU. The International Energy Agency estimates Russian oil production last month was less than 3% below pre-war levels. As we mentioned, oil and gas revenues, particularly from the European Union, are continuing to shore up the country's finances, despite the likes of Germany and Italy cutting their reliance on Russian energy. The state-owned energy giant Gazprom just announced a record first-half profit of 2.5 trillion rubles, sparking a 30% rise in its share price. According to Maxim Mironov, a professor of finance at the IE Business School in Madrid, the Russian economy is performing worse than 6 months ago. It's not enough to stop Russian President Vladimir Putin from financing the war. There's no doubt that Western sanctions have started to bite. Last month, a study by Yale University found that imports to Russia have collapsed and manufacturers are struggling to obtain components, including semiconductors and other high-tech parts. Russia's position as a commodities exporter has been irreversibly eroded, the report said, as Moscow has been forced to sell more of its oil and gas to Asia at a steep discount. Putin's quest for greatness. Putin was elected president following the chaotic disintegration of the Soviet Union and the 1998 financial crisis in which Russia defaulted on its debt and abandoned its fixed exchange rate. At the time, Russia's market value GDP has bottomed out at $210 billion, making it the world's 24th largest economy, behind Austria. Putin established an informal social contract with the Russian people based on his ability to deliver strong economic growth. Under Putin's rule, and buoyed by commodity price supercycle that would stretch well into the 21st century, Russia's GDP and market exchange rates rose tenfold, returning Russia to global relevance and providing purchasing power to its middle class. However, Russian researchers argued that as Russia's economy began to flag, from a peak in 2013, Putin sought new legitimacy to govern through foreign policy actions to re-establish Russia's status as a great power. These efforts were epitomized by the Crimean annexation of 2014, Russia's invasion of Ukraine against the backdrop of Russia's market rate GDP losing a third of its value between 2013 and 2020, represents a doubling down of Putin's strategy to seek legitimacy from great power status, rather than economic performance. Russian stocks traded on the UK market have fallen by 98%, wiping out $572 billion of wealth, while stocks on Russian exchanges remain suspended. The Russian currency has fallen to 155 rubles per dollar, a drop of more than 50% from 75 rubles per US dollar before the invasion. If not for recent capital controls and the rising prices of commodities brought about by the sanctions themselves that make up the majority of Russia's exports, it would fall even further. Russia's economic collapse in 2 years. Management professor Jeffrey Sonfield recently told Britain's Times Radio that Russia's economy could only survive with tremendous hardships for 2 years or so, as long as the West remains firm on sanctions. Other trade experts think a full economic collapse will take much longer. Rolf J. Langhammer, a German trade expert and former vice president of the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, adds that, in the long run, Russia will be no more than a gas station for China, but I don't buy this argument that the economy will collapse in 2 years. Russia had spent several years building its war chest and noted how international finance experts think the country is well prepared for any economic decoupling from the West. The International Monetary Fund adds that Russia had hoarded cash since the 2014 conflict in eastern Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea and was prepared for a war of attrition. Langhammer noted how Germany had paid 20 billion euros to Russia for energy imports in the first half of 2022, a 50% rise from the same period last year. Even if volumes fall with soaring prices, we will still pay them roughly 3 billion euros every month. However, despite the better-than-expected economic picture, the Kremlin stopped publishing a raft of economic data shortly after Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. How Putin burns through the country's reserves. Researchers from Yale notes how Russia drew down the $600 billion in foreign currency reserves that have acted as a cushion for Putin in the first months of the war. They claim that $80 billion has already been utilized, while another half of the reserves have been frozen by the West. Putin will only run short of cash for the war when the West can fully cut its reliance on Russian energy, which he said would likely take another 2 to 3 years, says Alexander Mikhailov, an associate professor in economics at the UK's University of Reading. If Putin's options become limited, Russia may effectively start printing money to meet skyrocketing military costs, which Mikhailov said would be madness, as it would lead to huge ruble depreciation, hyperinflation, and social unrest. Russians had experienced severe hardships under communism in the 1990s, following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Citizens should caution against overestimating when the public would rise against Putin. Mironov says that in the West, you have inflation of 10% and people are really scared and demand that politicians do something. Russian society doesn't work like that, so Putin has more leeway for the standard of living to decline by 20 to 30% without the risk of major resistance. Putin will be further isolated by secondary sanctions. Although a few countries in Asia, Latin America, and Africa have not imposed sanctions on Russia, some do benefit from the West's retreat. Recent reports suggest that China is quietly selling its surplus Russian gas back to Europe. Pressure is now building for the West to impose so-called secondary sanctions where foreign nationals can be cut off from the international financial system if they do business with Russia. The measures were used to great effect by Washington against third parties to isolate Iran's oil exports and nuclear ambitions. China is the main country that ignores Western sanctions, along with Turkey and India. Langhammer told DW, a Chinese retreat from supporting Putin as a result of secondary sanctions would be a major tailwind for the effectiveness of sanctions. Washington has previously said that secondary sanctions are an option, but experts urge patience because if they were introduced now, they could further spike demand for oil and gas and prices would rise even more. To justify invading Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has painted Russia as a hegemonic power reasserting its rightful claim to imperial greatness. Yet even before the invasion, Russia's economic capabilities were hardly capable of sustaining an empire. Putin may have led Russia from one times of troubles, but he has delivered it to another one. That's cold comfort to the Ukrainians and indeed to the rest of the world who are wondering Putin's next move. Well, that's about it for today. If you found this video helpful, kindly click the like and subscribe button. Also, let us know which one of these stocks we mentioned that you would like to buy, and you might want to leave a comment below. We love hearing from you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
If you enjoyed this video, you're going to want to watch one of these two videos right here. Enjoy!